What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Connected to the Web with two B's. Today's podcast is with my near and dear friend, Morgan. We've known each other for a very long time. We're going to have some fun and be goofy because that's just who we are. Yeah. And then we'll get to a serious topic about why I asked her to be here kind of in the second half of today. So for those of you that are coming back, watching again, I hope you enjoyed some of the other podcasts and some of the guests. We're trying to switch it up and have a little fun, but at the same time, with what's been going on recently, there's some guests that I'm having with a purpose who have something to give us and teach us. But before we get all fancy, you and I haven't hung out for a while, so I feel like we need to reconnect a little bit, and why not do it over air?
Yep.
So, super jealous because you live in the Hereford Zone.
I do.
Of which I grew up in. How's it been up there? Tell me what's fun about the Hereford Zone and what's not fun about it.
What is really fun is where we moved, we don't have any neighbors.
That can be fun.
It's really great. It's great for us. We can let our dogs run around. We have chickens. The boys can do whatever they want in the woods. It's great.
But are they egg-laying chickens?
They are egg-laying.
So have you been able to avoid the worldwide egg drama?
No, because we eat a lot of eggs.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
We're still buying eggs.
Yeah.
But crazy.
Supplementing.
What else? The community is just second to none.
Yeah.
We are really fortunate to be in a community that looks out for each other, who cares about each other, who, really takes pride in where we live and who we are. And that's really hard to come by. So I think that's what I love the most. What I don't love is not having cable or internet on my road. That's really hard. And having to drive to everything. It's 20 minutes to everything.
Yeah.
But again, I'm 20 minutes from everything, which is nice.
So what grocery store do you go to up there? What's your go-to?
Not Grouse.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah.
A
little far away. That's even further, right?
Grouse is pretty close. Grouse is 15 minutes, but we go to the Walmart in Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Walmeasy, as some kids say.
Yeah. My kids eat a lot.
It's hard not to. Yeah, boys.
Yeah,
boys.
They eat a lot.
What's funny is I haven't lived in Hereford for 30 years, and that's the same issues that I had when I was a kid.
Yeah.
The communities were amazing. Snow days are fun when they
got rid of the Hereford snow days.
I heard.
It's tragic.
It's tragic.
They still close for
nothing. The neighbors are awesome. It's so much fun, but any kind of technology, it's almost like it's a third world country. You get it last. And, I know a lot of, newer developments up there aren't having that issue. But if you live in the really cute older areas, they don't have Fios in the ground, So it's just a funny thing. And there's a lot of people that are like, what? You don't have internet? But it's not as simple when you're out there.
No.
There's
not enough people
life
on my road to
necessitate.
There's more livestock than there is people.
And I remember hearing back in the day, like for Fios to come out, there had to be a certain conditions met and a number of people or so forth. And it's like, really? Because I know in third world countries, they're trying to get internet out there and Starlink, blah, 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 blah. I don't know anything about that. But I'm like, it's Hereford. Why can't Hereford have it first?
We have it on either end of the street, just our stretch.
Not the connector?
Nope. The cows don't need it.
2025 and the cows don't need internet yet.
They
With
will.
AI, the cows may talk to us soon,
though.
Soon.
Yeah.
Well, that's super fun. And you lived there for how long? And obviously, I remember helping you get there, but I can't remember.
This year will be 5 years.
Dude, that went fast.
It went really fast.
And in those 5 years, the babies keep growing up.
That they do.
So Morgan and I met through youth sports long time ago. I think it was actually baseball, wasn't it?
Probably.
Yeah. So, and then her oldest and my oldest were the same age. And then as we kind of grew up and they had similar sports, we were always hanging out. And then your husband is just guy of all guys. There's so many people that say something to me like, oh man, Joe, it's so fun being around. You have so much fun. And I don't say this out loud, but many times I'm like, you haven't met Ryan Pagels yet. Because
he's fun.
I think I'm funny sometimes, but I just love your husband. He's a super awesome guy.
He is.
I can't imagine living with him every day. And is he like that all the time? Or just like anybody else, he's got a game face kind of thing?
I tune it out.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's
but
funny.
He's like that all the time.
Yeah. When you're in a room with her husband, you know it. He doesn't necessarily command and demand presence,
Definitely
but you will always gravitate towards him. He's just a super A-class guy. And I gravitated to that right away. And you were just collateral damage. It's okay. And he has a really cool wife too. But yeah, it's all about the Ryan show.
It is.
So we'll have to have him on here for goofy purposes.
He'd love to.
I don't know if I'd have enough editing to be able to get that out.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of editing that will have to take place.
So tell me about the boys. How old are they now?
Evan, my oldest, Evan just turned 14 in December, so he's finishing middle school.
Oh my gosh.
I haven't told you this yet, but he got accepted. Well, he got recruited to both Calvert Hall and Loyola.
It's not. This isn't public information yet.
No, it's public, but you don't know. I don't.
Yeah.
But he's committed to Loyola.
Oh, congratulations! Yeah. He's gonna be a Don, right?
Which is wild because Ryan went to Calvert Hall.
Oh, so that is a house divided. Mm-hmm. Will he be wearing the blue and yellow?
He will be. He will be. Hold on, throw.
Yeah, or at least he'd like to, pull his shirt up, right, and have
he'll wear like red underwear.
Well, he'll have red something, right? And if Ryan wears red underwear, he'll show somebody. So maybe just a T-shirt, like as he goes to the game, and like, Calvert Hall.
Yeah, lift it a little.
Oh, congratulations!
Yep, we're really pumped.
I mean, playing your son in football, I knew there was something different. I mean, we did a lot of scouting on the Terps, and when we played Hereford the one or two times, it was all about Evan. It started and ended with him. Your quarterback was wonderful. You had a really good running back.
Yeah.
Hereford, the linemen are big.
Shoffey's good. Shoffey's a good running back.
But it started and ended with the tight end.
Yeah.
It was so fun to talk about him in training.
It's wild.
And to know that I know that kid,
Yeah.
But he's come a long way from being in my basement on a treadmill where one of my kids hit go and then he fell off and hit face first. Like, he's come a long way. Now he's this monstrous beast.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
That's fun.
And I got so excited at Evans. How old is Ro?
Rowan is going to be 9 in a couple weeks. St. Patrick's Day.
My gosh. Yep. I remember that.
And he's kind of finding his own. He's finding his own. He's a football.
I was going to say, have you let him play football?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. That wasn't an option.
Yeah, that's not an option.
You know what? I feel like I shouldn't even ask that question, but nowadays I have to ask because there are some people that are like...
And it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
Correct.
But it's for us. So... he started at Pee Wee's and now he'll be in his 3rd year. So
they transform from bobbleheads to like little football players around 9 and 10 because Jack's going into 10. So it's just funny to see the bobblehead effect and come up. But my heart hurt though when I would see Evan wearing the H. I know. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Terp fan. I'm a Terp dad now, straight up transplant Harford County. But you don't forget Hereford.
And it's funny. I'm the opposite. I'm a transplant Harford County to Hereford.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh. Second half of our podcast is going to be about some sensitive subjects. But tell us what you do for a living, sweetheart.
So I work in behavioral health. I'm the director of business development at Maryland Addiction Recovery Center in Towson. We're a co-occurring mental health, substance use disorder treatment program.
Your demographic that you're focused on, is it just everybody who falls in that category, or are you focusing on adults or
18 and over?
Okay.
18 and over. Majority of our clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, most of our patients are in the emerging adult, young adult, 18 to 25, 30 range.
Okay.
So really kind of specializing in that.
But I'm sure that as we talk a little bit about some things that you're seeing the result of the teenage years in your patients. And I figured that would be a really unique perspective you could bring to my audience.
Yeah, most of the patients that we see have started in some kind of treatment experience in some form or fashion from sometimes childhood.
Yeah.
And it's consistently been present in their lives until adulthood. So.
Okay, yeah, so let's kind of go down that road if you don't mind.
Totally.
So I'm not even 100% sure what questions to ask, but I feel like anybody that's watching needs to get a baseline of information about what your experience is bringing to this conversation before we talk about the reason that I brought you on. So appease me, if you will, and tell me about what you're seeing on your end, and unfortunately for the communities, why you've been so busy lately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's... we're busier now than ever. I think what we're seeing in the behavioral health field in general, especially with the younger population, is this really specific change in the presentation of our patients. The mental health acuity over the last 5 years, I'm going to say post-pandemic, has been astronomical. And it's not just in young people, it's in adult. We see the anxiety in the world. You can almost feel the tension.
Absolutely.
And that has trickled down to our young people. I think in a lot of ways they've been the most affected. So we have been seeing higher instances of generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, a lot of OCD, a lot more major depressive disorder, and treatment-resistant depression that isn't just situational. Like a bout of the blues or bout of depression. It's long-standing chronic depression.
And when you say presentation of these, you're seeing these more than you had statistically pre-pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Okay. We've also been seeing higher instances of kind of the family unit, which plays a huge part in behavioral health, as you can imagine.
Sure.
The family dynamic is much different. There is another level of caretaking and codependency and fear around children, especially, that has altered in a way since over the last 5 years, I would say.
So codependency in this example would not be a healthy thing.
What we're seeing in our patients, no.
Okay, because it's combined with other things. So on its own, it could not be might not be a major issue, but when it's combined with these other things the individual is experiencing or presenting, it's kind of a Molotov cocktail. It could be.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I would imagine that if you're seeing 18-year-old plus, that some of the things like we talked about a minute ago are happening in this individual, he or she's life prior to being
absolutely
in your demographic of your patients. So tell me real quick, if you've got a new patient or client, whatever is appropriate, that comes in, are you asking about, have you asking if they've ever thought about suicide before?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then generally speaking, out of 100 patients, what's the general number, because as a layperson, that you're coming across are answering affirmative in any of those self-harm questions?
More than half.
So over 50% of those folks
and that's
have thought about it or tried it. It's all kind of in that answer. That just hurts my heart when I hear that.
Yeah.
And I feel like at the adult phase, 18 plus, these things probably happened when they were younger.
Absolutely.
I mean, I get chills even thinking about this. So when you are sitting down with a patient and you've had the assessment conversation, identified where opportunities you can help this person, what do you guys do? Do you set them up with a plan? I'm sure it has to be a lot of self-guided. You'd have to want to have help sometimes. And my naivety might be present in this, but walk me through that after you've already had an assessment and you and your staff decide, okay, here's what we can try to help this individual with. How does that work? Is it a multiple year concept? Is it a 6-month plan to kind of jumpstart and see what happens? What is the general treatment concept after an assessment's been done?
This is the most difficult aspect of kind of a presenting patient, helping them wrap their head around mental health, whether it's substance use disorder, some co-occurring mental health diagnosis, is a chronic, lifelong diagnosis, generally speaking. I mean, of course, there could be like an acute onset situational depression symptom, but what we're talking about is a diagnosis that is going to be permanent. Our patients, those symptoms might go into remission, but helping families wrap their head around the treatment plan, the goal of being in a treatment episode, various lengths of stay or various levels of care over a long period of time for a year. And that is hard to wrap your head around. We compare it to, say you get a cancer diagnosis.
Okay.
Say you get a
I was going to compare it. I'm glad you
diagnosis
did that,
of hypertension, type 1 or type 2 diabetes. It's not just let's stop the bleed and then you're on your way.
Band-Aid.
There is a long healing process, sometimes lifelong, that takes place. And you just, with traditional medical diagnoses, providers, families, patients are just like, okay, that's what we have to do. I'll do whatever you tell me to do for the most part.
I know, generalization.
You know,
it's okay.
Generalization. Most people are like, okay, if you get a cancer diagnosis, let's beat it. What do we need to do? I am all in. No questions asked.
What's the plan? Activate it. Correct. Bang, execute the plan.
With behavioral health, it's so interesting because families, patients don't think about behavioral health, mental health as a chronic, progressive illness.
Wow.
They really think of, let me just reduce the symptoms and I'm fine. And
individually or also the family too. They feel success is reached if the symptoms reduce.
And it's a two-part street. I mean, the family is the patient is the family.
Okay.
Patient.
That's a huge term.
People, especially young people, kids, if they're unwell for a long period of time, sometimes 5, 10, 15 years, there is going to be some cause and effect to the family system. Yeah. There is going to be a whirlwind of stuff.
Ripple effect at the very least.
To not just parents, but siblings, grandparents. It is a far-reaching ripple effect to the entire family system. So the whole family also gets sick in a way, dealing with behavioral health, mental health. So treating the identified patient is sometimes the easier part, but getting the whole family system on board, that this is a family, this is a family problem and it's got to be a family solution. I don't want to use the word problem, but this has to work for the whole family.
The concept is not the individual only.
Correct. And in a lot of other providers, sometimes it's just treat the identified patient, which you would think, let's just treat the identified patient, but we forget
That's
a lot of times.
Yeah,
of course. You have some suicidal ideation, a suicide attempt, maybe you're self-medicating with substances, other kind of maladaptive, unhealthy behaviors. Let's just treat those symptoms, treat you, and then let you go on your way. But if you're going back into a family system that's unhealthy,
unsupportive,
what's the outcome going to look like? So really getting the family on board for a long-term treatment plan.
I would imagine there's some resistance to that reality.
Tremendous.
Too. So not even, and when you gave the cancer diagnosis, I feel like there's less resistance with the test results.
Of stigma.
The stigma is, what did you say? Okay, I believe you. No challenge there. Treatment options, right? I almost have to believe, and by your body language, you're going to tell me I'm right, is that there are some people that say, no, that's not my kid. Yep. Or, again, if they're 18
it's not
plus,
that bad.
That's not my son, right? It's not that bad. Oh, my gosh. When you said that, I just got a stigma internally. I can't imagine having to deal with the whole family, but it's the best course of action.
Absolutely.
But as you just said, just to repeat what you said to the audience, that can be the toughest challenge sometimes.
It is, in my experience, the hardest part of treating a patient is involving their whole family.
Oh my gosh.
Because you don't just have one identified patient. Now you have multiple patients in the family system that you're treating.
And then the patient themselves is going through this journey mentally of identification, a diagnosis, maybe grief that they have put a word to what they're feeling. And for the healing to come, a couple phases or steps down the road, that family's got to be involved. But I would imagine sometimes there could be a conflict if the individual is ready to move forward and engage in a progressive plan, but the family isn't.
Oh, a lot of times it's not my problem, it's him.
Yeah.
Fix Joe and the problem will go away.
And the older I am, probably the less likely you have a family willing to do that. But, oh my gosh, you're amazing that you can even have this conversation and know that there are people that need help out there.
There are endless amounts of people.
I was about to say that, unfortunately, you have job security because this world's not getting any easier to deal with.
Yeah.
And
so the barriers are getting bigger and bigger.
I was literally going to say that. I was going to say, so we actually probably live in a world where it can get worse. And it is getting worse.
It absolutely is.
And the pandemic happened as you mentioned earlier, the isolation, I'm assuming, and then the different social constructs that became normal during that time.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
but it's not even surprising. And I know nothing about your industry, but I'm not surprised. I'm fascinated. And that hurts my heart that I'm not surprised.
Coupled with the boom of social media. So you have these two huge... I know.
Dude.
So you have... While we're on YouTube.
Yeah. The irony is not misplaced.
So you have these two huge, like, meteors kind of, like,
colliding.
Hitting Earth at the same time. And it's almost like a recipe for disaster. So you have the... the pandemic, which isolates, and mental health, addiction, these things, any kind of, mental health diagnoses breeds in isolation. It just multiplies. Coupled with, social media where you have no, intimate relationship or like face-to-face connection. Everything is virtual. You are, again, cut off from community. In an in-person way, really just breeds. It's a breeding ground for...
As I hear you say that, for the first time, I realized the horrible irony of the word social media, because you don't have to be a PhD holding member of our society to know that it's creating isolation.
It's antisocial.
It is antisocial. Isn't that... I was going to say that.
Crazy.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Crazy.
Like, what in the heck? And I'm trying not to use cuss words. But like, I can't imagine anybody who has something that is a little neurodivergent, I guess, having to deal with social media, because children who are completely neuronormal, might be the word to use, are getting destroyed because of social media. Neurotypical. Thank you. New term, neurotypical. And I learned from a former guest. I've never heard neurodivergent before. I was so excited to be able to repeat that word. But it's just nasty in itself to anybody who's 100% mentally healthy to have anything wrong. Again, wrong is the wrong word, but to have anything slightly off and then put that on top, the meteor analogy you put is so appropriate, because there's collateral damage when those two things collide. And then I think to myself, add in puberty, because we'll talk about that. I know your demographic is typically post-puberty, but my God, add in puberty.
I mean, I lived with it.
Literally.
I'm a 14-year-old. I get it.
How do any of these kids come out okay? It's crazy.
Quote unquote normal.
Yeah. Any version of it. Even if there's a range of normality, right, on the scale, even if you're like one end or the other, how do you even come out normal? And not to be all negative Nancy about it, but you almost wonder how kids even make it out. It's just crazy.
Yeah. I don't think, and there's often this like intergenerational kind of saying of like, it was different when I was a kid,
Back in my day. Yeah.
And it was, but when we're roughly the same age, like when we were growing up, there was no internet, there was no social media. I didn't have a phone until high school, and it was
college
you
for me.
Use it before 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Basically, your parents are going to yell at you. So there was still, I had to form in-person, really intimate connections with my friends, my peers, my family. I had to physically connect. I had to be social with someone. God forbid.
Social. You said social. I had to be social.
I had to connect with people in person. Now that isn't even really a thing. So it's just very interesting.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it makes my brain go 100 miles an hour in 20 directions at once.
Yes. And it kind of, it's like Pandora's box, like one road leads to another thought, leads to another point, leads to another, black hole of difficulties for especially our young people, our adolescents, our kiddos, our young adults, and even us.
Yeah.
I feel like my mom and my grandmother don't struggle with the same things that we do, because we were introduced to social media and it's still just as addictive to us.
Yeah.
We're
not immune to that.
We are not.
Not.
It's a human condition, and coming out of the pandemic, like it just affected everyone so deeply.
Okay, so I want to get to talking about teen suicide in a second, but I think we still need to have a chain link fence and link what we've been talking about so far. I think we're missing one little area. So as a layperson, I represent, I think, the majority of the population that doesn't know a whole lot about the topic and that is super sensitive, and it's tough to talk about, even though I'll talk about anything. So I think the thing in the middle we're missing is having a brief conversation of who is typically at risk for these things developing to the point where you get them at 18 plus. I think there's probably some misconception out there on what teen suicide statistics are in the demographic of the kids. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
So you mentioned about experiences, and I know you have a cool acronym to talk about.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So over the last maybe decade plus, there have been a new development in kind of a diagnostic tool for at-risk, if you will, populations called everything is.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a human condition. It doesn't just apply to one group of people.
Yeah.
I think everyone is at risk. But adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, is a new tool. There's an ACE test that you can administer to anyone. And in development, in your childhood, in those early formative years, and attachment and development are so important in kind of who you become, obviously. Okay. But nobody really understands what that means. And it isn't just things that happen to you that make you who you are, that make you Joe Webb, make me Morgan Pagels. It's what happens around you. What's happened to the people who are taking care of you. So
environmental, is that an appropriate word?
It's environmental. Yeah, and it kind of goes back to this nature versus nurture idea, which is a whole nother, you know, avenue we can go down.
Wink,
but
wink.
There is this ACE study talks about these adverse childhood experiences and how they contribute to someone being at risk for a mental health episode, a diagnosis, substance use disorder, any other kind of process addictions or maladaptive behaviors. Somebody, you know, who is coping or using other outside things, substances, food, exercise, sex, spending, gambling, whatever.
Yeah.
And
all the above.
Yeah. XYZ. You know, but when you're talking about a child, they don't really have access to these things. So how are they processing these adverse childhood experiences without having something to self-medicate, to self-soothe?
So the theory behind that is that they will typically present, they could present a mental health concept in lieu of the coping mechanism.
Yeah, I think the mental health diagnosis or the symptom of their mental health is really just a cause and effect of something in development, something in childhood.
So I would imagine that if I were to poll 100 people in my community, that the majority of people would think that a youth that has an ACE, an adverse childhood experience, would be most of the statistics when it comes to children who have self-harmed or successfully ended their own lives. As we talked, that's not necessarily the case. And that's where the tough part comes in, right?
Yeah, and I think an ACE is subjective. So what you think is not a big deal to someone could be a huge deal to me. And I want to use the word trauma, and I know that can kind of be a triggering word for a lot of people, but a traumatic event, what is traumatic to me it might not be traumatic to you. And that's personal and subjective to me. Based on a million different things. So something that's happening to me could cause me to respond or develop differently than if it happened to you. So that's where the challenge kind of comes in of having an individualized approach to treating someone who has had an ACE. And maybe a one-off is fine. And there's a scale. I don't have it memorized. I'm sure Joe can link it in the notes or the whatever.
Anything you want, I'll link. Yeah.
But let's just say, and don't quote me on this, maybe like 1 to 3 is a low risk. 3 to 5 is a moderate risk. 5 to 8 is, I think there is more than 10, but I'm just using
good example though. There's thresholds for risk level.
Yes, exactly. So
I want to give an example of kind of to the audience on what she's saying right now, because I grew up in a, let's just say, non-desirable situational
Correct.
issues with a step parent. And I'm going to get very vague on purpose because that's not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I have 4 siblings that I grew up with and 4 siblings that my father and stepmother have. So in the home that I grew up with in Hereford, we had a lot of drama, maybe trauma, and I'm going to leave it at that. But what's interesting, what you just said, is that one event could be traumatic to one child or multiple and not the other. And that's fascinating because I've never been able to put a word on what happened to my siblings and I had multiple siblings go down the self-harm route. One of them made attempts. One had thoughts and light bodily harm. One had significant attempts. Living in that household, 2 of us have had no presentation of any sort of thought process like that, and it's a lot of talk I've done with my siblings. 2 of us, it almost hardened us to the point where it affected our relationships because we had to put that wall up. Ooh, I'm going to start crying. That's why I'm not going to get specific.
Which is the other end of that spectrum. I mean, both are really problematic.
Obviously.
Both can be very problematic.
And in the context of what we're discovering and we're talking about right now, this is significant because in a household, it's so tough to be a parent. If something happens in your home, and I'm not referring to a child abuse situation because that's a whole other conversation. Some sort of event that was uncontrollable to the parents, if it happened, an accident, it could be a million things. Your children will all most likely deal with it in a different way. They're each little individual cases. So one of them might be completely fine with something that happened and one of them might not be. And I think that's a really good point to stop and sit with a second, because if anybody's watching, we're not trying to give them advice on how to run their life, but we're simply talking about a really important and tough issue that a lot of people don't talk about. And we're going to get into really detail that in a second. But there are things that a parent should understand, that if something happens in their house and there's a surface level of I'm okay,
absolutely,
you may just want to explore in an appropriate way and dig a little bit. And I am not implying in any way that a family that is a victim of a tragic loss of life could have prevented it. I am not going there. I'm simply saying that as parents, we're not helpless before that point where we may be able to use certain techniques and ideas, discovery, conversations, communications to simply identify those things. What could you give our audience 1 or 2 things as a parent that they may want to look out for if there's been an ace in their situation where they may say, I might want to get some help with my child, and just have someone talk to them, a professional?
Yeah.
What's one thing they can look at? And I don't mean significantly presenting side effects of that event, because that would be a little more obvious. I mean, things that are a little not obvious.
Sure. And I wanted to preface this. I'm not a licensed clinician. I'm not a medical professional.
Perfect.
I'm putting that out there.
But you're seeing the 18 to plus demographic come into your environment after these things have already happened. And I think your perspective is really important.
Absolutely. I think I have lived experience. I am now a mom of a teen, coupled with this is my profession. So I have a lot of different, perspectives on the topic. I think for me, a huge kind of, I don't want to say red flag, maybe beige flag.
Beige. I like that. Oh, I like that. Beige flag.
There's a red flag, there's a green flag, and then there's
double take it. Something should double take it.
Yeah, just a quick. changes in appetite, changes in sleep. I think it's really important to monitor how much time a kid is spending in their room alone. I think it's very important to kind of keep an eye on how much time they're spending um, behind screens. If they are, and the list can go on and on. I think that's kind of the biggest.
We could literally fill up a 10-hour episode
Absolutely.
of the last 30 seconds of what you just said,
Sure.
between being in the room alone, between being in the room with screens. And that could be video games, it could be pad time, it could be TVs, anything, all the above. Again, these are the breeding ground, which is the term you used, for things that could present and be unhealthy. And we're not talking about every kid that gets screen time. We're talking about if there was a childhood experience, an adverse childhood experience, ACE, that was present in your home or house or family or their lives. These are just things to look out, because if they were pairing with the ACE, they could be greater risk, right? Oof, man, that's crazy.
It's heavy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm almost feeling the pressure of our conversation, like, ugh, right? And we could go into a whole episode of the ACEs. We can go into a whole episode of social media. We can go into a whole episode of the screen time and what that's doing. And again, you're seeing the 18 plus where these things have already happened. You're dealing with college age, new career age, all these other pressures. But then when you rewind a little bit, add in family dynamics, social culture right now, like the social construct that exists, which is so healthy, and then puberty. It's like crazy town.
It is a recipe for disaster.
A recipe for disaster.
I mean, no wonder the dinosaurs went extinct.
That's a cute, light way to point it out. Like,
totally.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that we don't have a major extinction event style thing here with social media. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of like Skynet and crap with like Terminator. But at some point, AI is going to come into this conversation because the kids are going to be interacting with it. Kids aren't right now waking up on a Saturday morning and diving into an AI platform. But it is only a matter of time, probably faster than we think, where they're interacting with cutesy little things that become other things, right?
And it's
YouTube
a replacement
Kids
for human interaction.
Exactly. Now we're on YouTube, right? YouTube Kids is a great response to the over introduction of suggested videos to young people through the normal YouTube platform. You can't blame YouTube for that. It's just an algorithm. But the YouTube Kids is a way to protect that. It's a good response.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, the AI version of YouTube Kids may not come until there's an event where it's needed. And that's what makes me nervous.
Yeah.
Oh, man. You got to come back here like every week for the next 10 years, and we might not have enough time.
Yeah. We can talk until we're blue in the face.
Okay, so let's kind of transition into the reason that I reconnected, which I wish it was earlier, but I knew you were a wonderful individual and a person and, dear to me, and I knew that you could talk about the sensitive issue. Let's kind of talk about that and kind of, steer the audience in the direction of why I'm having non-business owners talking about their new landscaping business, and I'm having a super amazing person on a tough topic. Let's kind of go down that road if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So I guess as I kind of think about this, we should kind of back up a second and just understand that we are in a different environment than our parents were. Because you kind of talked about it earlier, and I want to double back on that. So I'm 43. I'm older than you, but both of our
40 almost. I'll be 40.
Respect your elders, please. Don't cut me off. I'm just kidding. But when we were growing up, our parents had their own issues to deal with in raising children. They did not include social media yet. So it's almost like it's double the work for us, because as we're experiencing social media, we then have to learn to educate, protect, and almost take over our children's experience with social media. And we don't have those skill sets. We're developing them. We didn't have parents saying, here's what I did when you were younger, try this, right? When it's a baby and the infant is laying in the crib, you've got parents and grandparents, God willing, if they're around, giving you suggestions and advice. We're literally blazing that trail together in our age group. And I guess I'm born in 81, so I think I'm the last year of the millennial. But just to put a word on it, millennial parents are dealing with this entire new demographic of platforms that are out there and opportunities. So in the last couple of years, you've mentioned that you've seen post-pandemic a lot of stuff go on. My question to you is, how, as a parent, do you recommend we protect and put walls up around the social media concept, understanding you can't take it away.
No.
Now, you can have them delete it, but it's around them anyway. And you might actually create unintentionally an issue if you remove it completely. So, where's the balance there, in your humble opinion?
Yeah. In my opinion, I think when we're talking about mental health and the effects on mental health, especially in terms of social media and screen time and internet, I think when you're taking care of a physical health, I like the analogy of when your kid's learning how to ride a bike, you put them in knee pads and a helmet because you don't want to have a broken bone. You don't want him to crack his head on the road. You don't want a concussion. So you put all of these safeguards, safety equipment in place to protect their brain, to protect their bones, all the things. When we're talking about mental health is health. Like, it is not just...
They're not separate.
It is not. It's not the body and the mental health. It's in the brain, it's in the heart, it's in the spirit.
That's huge.
And it is so often forgotten that mental health is health. And the same kind of safeguards that we have for our physical body, our physical health, need to be put in place for our mental health and our spiritual health. And I think that's a huge piece, in my opinion, especially as a parent of a teen, that I am constantly thinking about, like, what am I doing to protect my kid? Not just from, it's just a new thing that I need to protect my kid from.
And I would say that, and again, whole nother episode, we could do that. Mm-hmm. Let's do it. I'm all good. You're amazing. Always welcome back. But generally speaking, one of the things you can do to provide a healthy journey for your teenager, even young kids. This one is it's even younger now. Mm-hmm. People giving their kids cell phones at 7 years old. Just don't do that. Anyway, is knowing they're going to be in this social community and then teaching them that individual, the identity of who you are, needs to align in real life.
Absolutely.
The number one thing I would say, as a non-clinician, non-psychologist background, but as a very hyper-aware parent, and just I'm a pretty smart guy, is that you had to teach your child that who they are online is the same person they are in real life.
Absolutely.
And if they're not comfortable putting their real identity out there, that may be a sign they're not ready for social media. And there are levels of it as well. The second thing that I would say, and I'd love your feedback on this one, is that as a parent, screw privacy.
None.
It does not exist.
No.
And the moment you think your child deserves privacy, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Until they are an adult, they don't get privacy. Now, whether that has to have an initial conversation and build or not is one thing. It's obviously harder if you're like, oh my God, you're right, Joe, and your kid's had a phone for 4 years. That's going to be a tougher conversation. Hard. So what do you think about that when I talk about the privacy thing and then the self-identity thing? Does that resonate at all?
More than I care to admit. I think and I'm going to use my personal experience as a mom of a teen.
Awesome.
With all of my personal lived experience with mental health, with substance abuse, and as a professional who's done this for almost 20 years. I have a very unique, perspective on raising kids, but I also am just a human. Like, I struggle with parenting.
You're such a human.
I'm so human. So I'm gonna talk more about my older son, not so much my younger son, because he's really just still into like the YouTube. But with my older son getting into middle school and high school, he's not in high school yet, but he will be. The idea of how much can you share, how much should you share, and who you should, correct.
Yeah.
And who you should or should not share it with. And he's learned some lessons the hard way. I'm just
Has
gonna. Yes, he has.
Mine has too.
And it sucks.
I can't even talk about them.
I'm
pretty
not
tough
gonna.
lessons.
Yeah, I'm not gonna share that because it's not my story to tell. But I will say that even if I've put these safeguards and I've had the conversations, kids are gonna be kids.
Yeah.
Kids, especially boys, especially teenage boys going through puberty, they're kind of dumb. Sorry.
I'll admit it.
As a boy who went through...
Adult boys are dumb too, by the way. Adult men are dumb.
So, I think for us, really presenting social media, when he started asking for these things, and I was a really hard no until you're in high school. And
that was our original plan.
That was that's not everybody's original plan. Yeah. And that was really tough. And it's funny because moving to Hereford really played a huge part in this, because we moved from Bel Air, where we had a neighborhood with tons of kids, to a really rural house.
Yeah.
In a really rural community.
Geographically a little more isolated.
Correct.
Yeah.
Again, no internet, more cows on my street than people. During the pandemic.
Oh.
So it was really unique for us, because he moved to a new school, which is an ACE, an adverse child, and I'm not saying I'm not gonna.
But it could be.
It could be. But, for us, we moved to a new school in the pandemic during virtual learning to an area with no kids on our street and no immediate access to a playground, to a rec center, to anything. He couldn't just jump on his bike and ride to a friend's house. So it was weird. So how do you connect him with kids? He was 5 years ago, so he was 10, 9, something.
Yeah.
4th grade,
right
5th
there.
grade, whatever.
Yeah. Starting middle school.
Yeah. How do you connect him with a new peer group in this situation? So when he finally went back to... So in the beginning, it was really like video games. And that's really kind of the best way for him to keep connected to his friends back home.
Yeah.
Sure, we could coordinate play dates. We had a lot of control over like who he was with.
Yeah.
And then when he got back into school, he's making these new friends. Great. Getting into middle school, when they're starting to connect, they're asking for these social media platforms. And for us, we got him a cell phone pretty early because we're isolated.
Yeah.
If I'm taking him to school's 15, 20 minutes from us. If he's at a friend's house, it's 15, 20 minutes from us. So I want to be connected to him.
Which makes sense.
Safety.
The cell phone.
But if you're giving a kid, you're not giving a kid a jitterbug flip phone. Like we had a Nokia phone that only has Snake on it. Like you couldn't do anything on that phone like we had when we were in high school.
I didn't even have Snake at first, but yeah.
Now we're giving them a little mini computer, a key and a doorway to anything and everything. And how do you control that? So I have always been very, very protective over... I back that up. I wasn't always really protective because I trusted my kid that he has a good head on his shoulders. I fell into the trap. Like, he's a good kid. He's smart. He's well-adjusted. He's not a problem. He's neurotypical. He doesn't have anything. And in puberty, something shifts.
Just boom.
And it just changes. And even though the kid that he has always been... doesn't mean he's going to change, and he's going to grow, and he's going to have to have experiences.
Yep.
So I need to have the wherewithal as a parent to protect him from that, and I didn't. And
I feel like you're describing my son right now.
Yeah.
And same thing, but we both share a oopsie experience.
Yes, totally.
And I don't even know what yours was, but the way you're talking.
A couple oopsies.
Yeah, and I'm just like, it could be anybody kind of thing.
It was kind of like we were running into the same problems over and over of like, you can't do this. You can't do this. Why are you doing this? And finally I had to reel it back in. And
it's tough. Course correction's tough.
It is really tough. But I think talking to my kid like a human, as talking to my kid who thinks he's an adult,
Yeah.
You want to talk like an adult, we're going to talk about grown-up things.
Yeah.
So I really had to explain to Evan what is happening in his brain with all of this. And he's like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I promise you it is.
Yeah. That's great.
So I had to tell him what's happening and tell him this is what I'm doing. I don't care if you don't like it. If you don't like it, you can give me the phone back.
Absolutely. These are my conditions.
This is my phone. I pay for it. It's mine. It's not yours. So we have software on his devices that allow when he can use it, what he can use.
Yep.
Shout out. I know you're an Android family.
Yes.
But we are an Apple family.
Yep.
Tale as old as time. But with his iPhone, we have screen time set up on his phone, even at 14.
Yeah.
That dictates when he can use it, during what hours he can use it, what's available during those hours, what's available when it's not during those hours. He can't download apps on his own. He can't change his contacts. I go through every single setting in screen time and regularly and edit it, tweak it, change it, maybe give him a little bit more, maybe take a little bit less.
Yeah.
And it's just not an issue. His password on his phone is set by me. At any given time, I can grab his phone, open it, and look at whatever he wants. And if he fights me on it, he loses it.
Yes.
Period. And
this is a huge thing because I know a lot of parents are like, oh my gosh, I couldn't do that. And again, I'm going back to the fact, even if you didn't pay for it, even if he worked, like he's 14, he's not child labor, but like if he worked with you or his parents or grandparents, whatever, and got cash and he bought a phone, I don't care.
Yeah.
The moment you give them privacy, there is an opportunity for something bad to exist. Now, I'm not referring to helicopter parent or the best parent. I'm simply saying she's giving us examples specifically of ways that you can remove the privacy and introduce at your pace. The nighttime thing is huge, right? Because it's going to keep them up. And sleep deprivation itself will cause it, right? But some of these kids, if given the opportunity, if they're not really tired at 9 or 10 o'clock, will be on it till 1 a.m. and not intentionally like, I'm staying up. They'll just, boom, and it's 1 a.m., right? So I applaud you for that. Google does have a version of that. The Family Link feature in the Google platform is very invasive. Not the text messages invasive like some of the Apple programs have, but the time usage, everything like that. So there are resources, regardless of the type of phone
and there's
out there.
Services that you can get.
Yeah, mine's free.
Bark, whatever.
Yeah, the Bark. I love the idea of Bark. I just said before I go paying that, which is a low price, $14.99 I think it is per month, and it's multiple phones because we have 2 kids, with me and JMO. But I decided to give the Google Family Link a try,
it works for us.
And it's pretty intrusive. But again, currently, as we record this in late February 2025, my 15-year-old does not have social media as a result of an event. Take it back, right? And I want to describe to the audience real quick, and we're getting a little off topic, but we're kind of not. We're kind of not though, because my other children noticed a change back with the removal of social media in my oldest.
Same.
This young person you describe as being a wonderful young man, a good kid, blah, blah, blah. That was and still is my oldest. But he had started exhibiting these weird traits that were coming out of nowhere.
Very uncharacteristic.
And at first we're like, is this puberty? Testosterone, certainly. That's even different, right? But I'm like, is it not? But when we remove social media, he began to revert back to the pre-social media person. And my 7 and 9-year-old children noticed it.
Absolutely.
That's when it was like, whoa. Because this amazing, my oldest is an amazing young man.
Yes.
He could actually change the world one day. But it turned him into this thing slowly. So just this past weekend, we discussed about rolling it back out.
Absolutely.
Because I don't believe in removal. You have to learn how to use it, right? So we're going to get there. But all right, so we're a little off that. Let's bring it back around. So in this world of privacy and the cell phones becoming, it's an amazing opportunity. Absolutely. It's also, there's some dark things that can happen there. Some ACEs, even from that, right?
Even in all of those parameters, we still had a lot of challenges. So there's not going to be one thing that I can do to protect my kid from all of it.
No perfection.
There's no perfect catch-all to prevent a mental health experience, like a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
And even in all of those safeguards, um, you know, we have still experienced in our family challenges. And taking away, I cannot rely on a device to protect my kid.
Amen.
It
Period.
has to come, period. It has to come from me and my husband in our family system, in our family unit, constantly doing a check-in on ourselves, with each other, our kids on their own, a barometer, if you will, of like, how is your mental health? How is that looking? And checking when it's good and getting a good answer, or talking about it on the good days every day, even though today was great, Mom,
Yeah.
it becomes habit. Practice makes, not perfect, practice makes habit. So if you're in the habit of doing this self-check with your kids, with yourself, with your spouse,
huge.
On the bad days, you already know that conversation's coming. So hopefully you have a little bit of rapport and trust with your kid, that as like a person. Like Evan, I think, trusts me as a person, not just as his mom.
Yeah.
That if he's struggling, he can talk to me. That I'm going to be safe for him.
You're also creating a foundation,
absolutely,
and a skill for them to take that out into the world, and you're building a framework inside of them of strength.
Absolutely. This is emotional intelligence.
Yeah, every young person is going to have their own journey of that strength journey, and not everybody will completely become as strong as they should be, because life and humanity, right? Yeah. And culture and society. Sorry.
All the things.
All the above. But what I love you sharing that is that, again, one of the reasons that I brought you on is that you can have a purposeful change for the positive if your child is exposed to these concepts. So it's not a sit back and deal with the ramifications of not. Now what do? I want to encourage proactive conversations, proactive habits, skills, family interactions. And what you just said, again, I am not giving this answer with the full power of a PhD behind it. I'd be willing to bet that an overwhelming majority of parents out of 100 polled would less than majority, so opposite, less than half of the parents have an institution created in their home that fosters that kind of communication, like you just said.
Yeah.
That's not the normal place.
Yeah.
That makes you guys amazing. I don't even do that as much as I want. As I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, well, I do this, but I want to include that. And that's why I have you here. I just want to have these conversations. And if one family says, I saw that podcast with Joe and Morgan.
Let me try
that and see what happens. Bang. This is why we're here.
Yeah,
that's all it takes.
And this is kind of like preventative measures. This is kind of those safeguards. And we comparing it again to physical health.
Yeah.
You have these safeguards in place: preventative health, yearly exams, routine blood work, wearing your seatbelt. These things, if we have that framework in terms of emotional intelligence and our mental health, it's going to work the same way.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to my last part of our conversation is why we actually are sitting here, right? So 3 weeks ago now, again, now I'm recording this in the end of February, so depending on when I release the footage, because, it takes me a couple weeks, we had a loss in the community of a young man that took his life. I don't know anything about their family dynamic.
Nope.
I don't know anything about the child's state. It's none of my business. I'm not going to ask. Even though they're in my community, I could probably find out.
Sure.
None of my business. But if that is happening in our community, my first question is, how often is it happening, as an awareness conversation? And the second question is, what can we do about it as parents? So the reason that I'm having guests on like Morgan is to have conversations about preventative, let's just call it what it is, preventative medicine. It's not pharmaceutical medicine.
No.
It's preventive medicine. Just having these environments where your child feels comfortable. Because if they're not comfortable coming to you as a parent, or you're not engaging enough to recognize when there's small changes, doesn't make you a bad parent. It just means that you may be less likely to catch something early enough to do something about it.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where I wanted to talk about that.
And this has to change because the nuclear family of 40 years ago looks very different than the nuclear family of today. It's shifted a lot in our culture. You have both parents working 40 plus hours, sometimes 2 jobs. You have multiple kids, multiple sports. You're go, go, go. So there isn't as much time to pause and kind of check in with ourselves, sit down at the family table. Like, I don't even remember the last time my family sat down for more than 1 or 2 days in a row eating a family dinner.
And you brought up something really too. I mean, again, God, we could have 90 episodes.
Yeah, sorry.
But with the family dynamic of having 2 providers, they are at work more. If it's not exactly coinciding with school hours, that means that children are then being alone more often, which is a breeding ground if the other things are mixing in this cocktail for bad things to happen. Not every kid, it's not about being fearful as a parent, but just being aware that these situations could exist. If you're a 2-income family, you might need more of a burden to have these conversations. If you have a stay-at-home mother, maybe she sees or the tiny changes faster, right? But if you have a 2 income household and you're both working and it's not remote on one of them, you're gonna be gone more often, and there's no guilt there. But you might even have more of a responsibility to dig in like this.
Different kind of latchkey kid.
Different kind of latchkey, right? And as you mentioned, it's a cultural shift because of the cost of living right now, which again is not our control. And the families that are responsible enough to say we want this lifestyle, so now we need 2 families. There is a sacrifice there, and you will not be home as much. So the self-teaching to your individuals who become adults one day is critical for those kinds of families, which is a majority of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, this is huge. Okay, so I want to talk again about preventative and proactiveness because I think you have a unique perspective. Again, seeing your business is seeing the aftermath, the 18 plus. What types of things can we talk about where the audience would benefit, parents watching, where they would benefit from your experience when it comes to teen suicide? Is there any issue we can have a conversation about we haven't hit so far where they would benefit from having this conversation? We've hit a lot of topics today.
We have hit a lot of topics today.
But there's still a million of them we haven't covered.
I think that this hush-hush, what happens in our family is our business, is crazy. I think that there's a reason that there is a the saying, it takes a village. Yeah. Because it does. Yeah. It does take a village.
A community
around
network.
Me.
Put your word in there.
XYZ, whatever you want to call it. It's interchangeable. But again, isolation. And that can be as a family system. If I isolate my family system of these problems are only happening to me, I don't want anybody to know what's going on in our home. I don't want to tell people what our struggles are. What are people going to think about me?
Embarrassment.
It's embarrassment. It's shame. It's guilt. It's fear. It's fear is what it is.
Yeah, it's versions of fear.
Absence of faith. And I think the two can coincide. I think you can have both, but it's really important for us, for our family, and I would suggest other families, but again, I'm not going to say what you should and shouldn't do with your family, but, to actively talk about what's going on. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. Okay. So it's not an isolated incident. Yeah, of course, teen suicide, suicide rates are on the rise. But what I struggle with, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be struggling with it too. And sharing that burden is halving the weight. Yeah. So I think that's huge.
And again, that's why we're having this conversation today.
Having the conversation as often as I can.
And anybody I talk to about this is like, I'm so glad you're saying something.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, why isn't everybody screaming at the top of their lungs? And it's because
it's icky.
It's icky, it's tough, it's sensitive. And what's kind of freaked me out is as I've begun to do a little more research and communicate with people about that Facebook post I put up about, hey, can I talk to any individuals that are in this field, is that it has happened so much around me that I didn't even know about. Now, not that I need to know about it, or it's like, our child passed away,
so
everybody knows,
common.
right? But it's so common. Thank you for saying that, because that's the part that freaked me out. And then young boys, statistically, the math is skewed in one direction. Not that young girls aren't having issues, but from the little math that I saw, it is heavily weighted to young boys. So, why? Another episode, but it exists. No matter what your philosophy is as a parent, these things exist. So to have an ostrich mentality with your family or your community and pretend it doesn't exist isn't the healthiest for your family. It's not to say you got to tell your neighbor that your child's having these thoughts, but just having conversations among your mom group or your dad group or your sport fam group, like, hey, are you guys noticing anything about the social media really messing up these kids? Like, what time do your kids go to bed? And then, one's like, oh, my kid goes at 2 a.m. And you're like, what is he doing during that time? Right? Just being comfortable to talk in your community. And I think the positive thing could be learning some techniques like you mentioned earlier, specifically that you deploy with your family, that you might not have thought about, right? I want to end this on a positive note that there's things that other families have learned as a result of their experiences that you may be able to benefit from, but that you never will if you don't talk about it. And I'm hoping that some sort of sense of openness is the pathway to help one child in our entire community. If the results of the conversations that I'm engaging in, which are very tough, result in one family saying, okay, let's just kind of dig a little deeper, and then being able to prevent something. The cool thing is I might never know the effect that this conversation might have because there won't be an issue. And that's kind of the magic about it. It's crazy. Morgan, we need to have another conversation because we don't have enough time today. But I want to thank you so much for coming here and the strength to talk about these sensitive issues. And I know that you have this iron forged path in your past that has presented your calling to help people with what they're dealing with. And I just appreciate you being willing to come and tell us about what you do for a living, because it's so huge. What is the name of your organization again?
Maryland Addiction Recovery Center.
Maryland Addiction Recovery Center.
Mark for short.
Mark.
Because it's
We're going to put some information in the description of this episode for those resources. Any other resources for mental health that you think the community should know about?
NAMI is a great organization. The
NAMI?
Yep, the National Alliance for Mental. Oh gosh, NAMI. I can't think of it right now. We might have to cut that out.
We'll fill it in. We'll fill it in though. So
NAMI is great.
Your Mark, NAMI is good. What else?
NAMI is great. And I think information about ACEs is going to be really important.
Okay.
And I'm happy to share some local resources for our community, but reaching out to the mental health community if you need help. The suicide hotline, 988, I said that very loud. 988 is huge. 988 you can call and get a clinician anytime, connect you to resources.
I mean, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 988.
That's huge.
And that's relatively new.
Okay.
So I'll make sure that you have a lot of this information.
Yeah, and we'll put it up there. So, because I want people to take something viable other than your amazing time today. Okay, well, we're going to wrap this up. My brain is just all kerfluffled in a wonderful, wonderful way because of all the amazing things we talked about. And if you have any questions about the subject material, Mark itself, if you have an 18-plus person in your community or family that you think could benefit from our services, please reach out. But on the lighter side, just about education and preventiveness, awareness. We're not clinicians. We're not pretending to be, but we're just having the conversation. So thank you for having the conversation.
Anytime.
Any guest that comes on the show, I always say you're now connected to the web, 2 Bs. So as cheesy as that is, I'm going to roll with it. Thanks, guys. I hope you got a lot of this episode. This is super awesome. This is the second episode of 4 or 5 I have planned where we're talking about sensitive topics. So I appreciate you watching and listening, and hopefully you can take the information out into the community and we can make a difference with it. So
love it.
Have a great day. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you later.